So we have some new polling data that just came out on the Russia-Ukraine war and on what the American public wants to do in response to that. So this is from YouGov. Let me go ahead and throw that graphic up on the screen for you. So this is how much either overwater or underwater these different ideas are. So sanctions are plus 51. Plus 51. Send money plus 43. Send weapons plus 38. Send troops to NATO. I don't know exactly what they mean by that. Send troops to NATO. I don't know if that means let Ukraine join NATO or send U.S. troops to NATO countries that are already NATO countries. I don't know, but it's plus 31. No-fly zone plus 25. Now we're going to come back to that in a little bit. Ukraine in NATO is plus 20. Cyber attack Russia is 0, so it's basically 50-50. Send soldiers to help but not fight, so like boots on the ground / training soldiers, Ukrainian soldiers. That's 5 points. Underwater. Drones on Russia. Thankfully, that is 19 points underwater. Airstrike Russia. 33 points underwater. Send soldiers to fight. 35 points underwater. So, look. I mean, the basic takeaway from this is people in the U.S. right now there's an appetite for getting more involved than you'd think. Now, the question is, well, how did this come about? How did we get to this point? And of course, I would submit to you that it's largely the media and the media focus and the lack of a real education on the various issues involved in this conflict. So I told you we'd go back to the no-fly zone one. Look, the no-fly zone one is 25 points over water. That means the American people overwhelmingly want a no-fly zone. Here's the problem with the poll. People don't know what a no-fly zone is. People don't know what that entails. So, you know, in the minds of average Americans, they might think it's like you press a button and there's a giant, you know, Jedi force field around Ukraine where Russia can't bomb anymore because of the invisible force field. Or, you know, whatever. You press a button and then scramble all of the technological systems within a Russian plane and they can't hit their targets or whatever. I think people are interpreting a quote-unquote no-fly zone as if it's this very, like, above-board, highbrow, modern form of repelling an attack. And they're not thinking about it looking at what it really is. Because what it really is the U.S. and or NATO actively shoots Russian planes directly out of the sky in Ukraine. So in other words, we do an act of war on Russia, another nuclear-armed country. And then, of course, they react, they retaliate, they start shooting at our people. Maybe Vladimir Putin launches cyber attacks against the U.S. and the internet goes down for a week. You know, if you do that, you are in a hot war with Russia. There is no, like, tit-for-tat escalation anymore of how it might spiral out of control. That, by definition, is out of control. It's so out of control that the people who are closest to this conflict are the ones who have pumped the brakes on this idea the most. Joe Biden was like, that would be World War III. Jen Psaki was like, we can't do that. That's World War III. Marco Rubio said it, and he's a Hawks hawk. He's a neocon. Even he's like, look, we can't do it. That's World War III. Boris Johnson, same thing. Like, I don't know what you want me to tell you, dog. We're not in a position where we could do that. That is World War III. So this is the problem with doing polls, but not educating the public at the same time. Not asking the question in a way that portrays all of the information so they can make their mind up in an intelligent way. And you can't help but blame, again, the media for this, first and foremost, because, I mean, when it comes to independent media and new media, credit to them, because every time I've ever heard anybody bring up a no-fly zone, everybody says what that is, which is, that is World War III. That is, we shoot Russian planes out of the sky. But when you watch mainstream media, they don't give you that context. They act like a no-fly zone is this very, like, surgical thing where nobody gets hurt and you're just repelling Russian attacks without any casualties. So now, the other thing I don't like about this poll is when they ask about, like, do you support sanctions? It's plus 51. So it's way above water. Now, if you ask me that question, my reaction is going to be, which sanctions? Like, which sanctions are you talking about? You can't just say, do you support sanctions? That's like saying, do you support government? It's like, well, what do you mean, do I support government? Are we talking about Medicare and Social Security, or are we talking about bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Those things are a little bit different. So it's the same thing. Do I support sanctions? Well, do I support seizing the offshore bank accounts of all of Putin's billionaire oligarchs? Do I support not allowing Putin or any of his oligarchs to leave Russian airspace? Do I support taking their yachts? Yes, yes, and yes. Do I support making it so that Babushka can't go to the bank and can't take any money out and the entire Russian economy implodes? No, I don't support that at all. I don't want to hurt the civilians. I don't want to go after them at all. If anything, that might make them turn on the West, because then Putin gets to say, don't blame me. Look at what the West is doing to you. They're doing collective punishment. So there were no distinctions in this polling, and as a result, people just put the smiley face on the sanctions as if all the sanctions only hurt the wealthy in Russia or only hurt the government or top military officials. Well, no, a lot of them hurt regular people, and I think, maybe I'm wrong and maybe I'm naive here, but I think if you actually were to educate people in America who gets hurt by various different sanctions, then they'd be more nuanced and they'd say, well, I support that sanction, but I don't support that sanction. So I don't like how that question was asked either. The only thing, which is, a very, very positive sign, is actually doing war, like sending U.S. troops to the region, is wildly unpopular. Wildly unpopular. And that cuts across, ideological and partisan lines. Basically, there's no appetite, even given how bad the situation is, there's no appetite for the U.S. to get directly involved when people know that would be us getting directly involved. There was even a poll of Republicans that just came out. It was in the Washington Free Beacon. And the position that was the most popular was sanctions. And the position of let's send U.S. troops there was under 20%. So, and again, that cuts across partisan lines and it cuts through partisan lines and ideological lines. People don't want there to be a hot war. But if you phrase the questions in a way that's kind of misleading, like in this, you can trick people into supporting a hot war, like by asking for a no-fly zone. The other thing is, and again, this goes back to the media, 20 points over water to put Ukraine in NATO. I have to blame the media when I look at that. I have to blame the media because I don't think your average American knows the role that NATO played in getting us to this point in this conflict. Now, I've changed my view on this NATO issue. I used to think, hey, if we didn't expand NATO in the first place to Russia's border, then maybe none of this would be going on at all. That was my view previously. Now, based on Vladimir Putin's own words and why he says he's doing what he's doing, I've now changed that view, and I think he probably would have done this or something like this, even if the NATO never expanded to his border, because half of his speech was about all these other historical grievances he has against Ukraine, where he basically feels like Ukraine's a fake state. It's ours. It should be ours. They're in debt to us. They turned their back on us, and now we're gonna make them fall in line. I also think natural gas has something to do with it. He wants that natural gas in Crimea and in eastern Ukraine and in western Ukraine. So I've changed my view on it. But having said that, I still would have never expanded NATO in the first place, because even if that gets us 5% closer to peace, that gives us a 10% chance at peace, and maybe this doesn't happen, I'd take it. So the fact that Ukraine and NATO is plus 20% tells me yet again, I don't think the media is doing a good job explaining to people all the various factors that have led us to this point. Because I think most people, given the history of what went down, I think most reasonable people would say, yeah, sorry, Ukraine. Sorry, post-Soviet buffer states. We're going to not escalate tensions and get us to the brink of war to have you in the alliance. We're just not going to expand. Sorry. So I think most people would have that position if they knew the facts, but they don't know the facts because the media doesn't teach them the facts. So, yeah, it's the poll does not have great results, but the questions weren't asked in a very straightforward way, in a way that's educational and informational, which is needed because I say this all the time about Americans. Americans aren't stupid. In fact, if you ask people policy questions, their instinct is generally like, I want to do the thing that helps me and my neighbor. So they're not stupid, but oftentimes they are ignorant. So they don't know like historical stuff. And so if they don't know what a no-fly zone entails, they hear it, it sounds very above the fray. They're going to be like, yeah, that sounds good, I guess, but they don't know what it means. They don't know that that's World War III. So anyway, not the greatest poll, but those are the findings, and we'll get to this later. In fact, this might be the very next segment, but there's been an interesting reaction from the American public to how Biden has handled this, and it's actually one of the first things in a long time where he gets positive ratings. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.